All right, clip this right now.
Mm-hmm.
If the next expansion is a Scourge expansion, I will shave my head. Watch both. I'll watch the other one another time. Not right now,
In
though.
the first part of this series, we examined the Lich King, and we figured out exactly
this is the second
what
part
he
of the
was.
Lich King video.
Today, it's changing. We're going to turn to his forces, the Scourge, and Kel'Thuzad, the man who propagated them across Azeroth, plus, of course, a whole bunch of other things. You see, the Shadowlands expansion is almost entirely built off the story of the Lich King, his allies, his enemies, his forces, and that...
Please, Bellular, do not fucking say that, because if you say that, then they will believe that I have to shave my fucking head. See, because I said at the beginning, if there was a Scourge or a Lich King expansion, that I'd shave my fucking head, and here we are.
Really means that understanding this stuff actually does matter to your gameplay experience. And that's a gameplay experience that, of course, all starts off with the Scourge invasion. So that is where we're going to start off today's episode. The impending Scourge invasion of Azeroth is, of course, part of the Jailer's plan. It's a part of his plan that entirely relies on the Plague of Undeath, and of course, the necromantic power that created the Plague, i.e. the Scourge, that originates from Maldraxxus. Now, previous lore stated that Ner'zhul crafted the Plague of Undeath. However, the existence of Maldraxxus, a place that is already full of, well, plagues of undeath, ghouls, and abominations, pretty much rules out him being the source of the plague.
Why would they make Maldraxxus why would they make all the warriors like just undead skeletons? It seems like you could go with something that would be better, like super robots or like, I don't know, like something that's not skeletons.
Afterlife's Maldraxxus actually explains the situation for us, though, because in it, Draka finds out that the House of Plagues had fallen. Now, do remember that the Azerothian Scourge came into being from the Plague of Undeath, so it very much seems that the House of Plagues fell, and then the Plague of Undeath was smuggled from its ruins out of the Shadowlands and then to Ner'zhul. Now, as already established, this was almost certainly done by the Dreadlords. So yes,
the Dreadlords are literally the Illuminati. Like, every bad thing that happens goes back to the fucking Dreadlords. No, they're straight up the Illuminati. Like, I'm not even kidding you. Like, think about it, man.
Lich King was given the Plague of Undeath by his Dreadlords. Now, he could have modified it, that could be the case, and that would actually allow the Shadowlands lore to coexist with what we had previously thought, that he had, of course, some part in creating it.
George Soros?
But that is the origination, that is the source of the Plague of Undeath, a plague that we, of course, are going to be contending with in the Shadowlands pre-patch. Now, Blizzard's own marketing materials say that Maldraxxus is where the Lich King called the power of the Scourge from. So yes, the Plague of Undeath appears to have been taken from Maldraxxus as a part of the conspiracy that Draka deals with in Afterlife's Maldraxxus.
I'm gonna be so mad if they build up this whole fucking Dreadlords thing where they've had like 100,000 year fucking sleeper cell plot that they're trying to do, and then we beat the plot and we fucking completely circumvent it in a patch. It's like this 100,000 year plan. It's like, oh, we got you. No, nice try, guys. Like N'Zoth.
Of course, then, well, did its thing for many, many years, as has been covered in previous lore, much of which, of course, was orchestrated by Kel'Thuzad, an individual who was and will continue to be a very important figure in the lore. So, let's put Kel'Thuzad under the microscope.
Wait, Kel'Thuzad is going to be in the lore again in Shadowlands? What the fuck? I didn't even know that.
First, a set of facts. Kel'Thuzad, as a man, was keenly interested in necromancy, which, of course, originates from the Shadowlands, from Maldraxxus.
Of course.
He was contacted by the first Lich King back when he was in Dalaran, and as we saw in the last episode, Blizzard actually did confirm that the Jailer is the master of the Helm of Domination. And that means that, yes, the Lich King that contacted Kel'Thuzad was under the influence, be it wholly or partially, of the Jailer. So, of course, that happened. Kel'Thuzad then traveled north, he climbed the steps of Icecrown, and he met the Lich King. Now, bear in mind that...
Wait, Kel'Thuzad met the Lich King? What the fuck? Is that real? I didn't even know that. You, like, shake hands? Like, I wonder, like, how that goes. Like, you're just like, hey, it's me. Like, so wait a minute. Like, where did Ner'zhul have Frostmourne? I don't even know this. I'm not even sure. Did Ner'zhul have Frostmourne? No, I don't think that he did.
By this time, the Lich King had experimented somewhat with the Plague of Undeath. So, roughly, shortly after this, what happened is that Kel'Thuzad signed up for the team. He then returned home. He founded the Cult of the Damned, and he then spread the Plague of Undeath across Lordaeron. That, of course, is what we see in Warcraft 3. And that does mean that, yes, when you're actually playing the opening thrusts of War 3, well, you're actually engaging with stuff that originates from the Shadowlands, our most recent expansion.
Okay.
Now, of course, the Legion thought that this whole shebang was their plan. They, after all, did believe that the Dreadlords were their servants. That is, of course, something that the revelations of the Shadowlands expansion actually, well, disproves. No, what actually happened is the Jailer's agents orchestrated the downfall of the House of Plagues. They did that to get the plague. They got that plague to Ner'zhul. He then gave it to Kel'Thuzad. Now, of course, we all know how the plague ripped through Lordaeron,
this is the Illuminati,
man. In the events of vanilla World of Warcraft, Kel'Thuzad unleashed it again, but this time planet-wide across all of Azeroth. Obviously, it failed. We went to Naxxramas and we defeated him.
Yeah.
But we handed his phylactery over to a corrupted priest, who then just returned it to the Lich King. A few years later, the second invasion was unleashed, but
that was a mistake. We should not have done that. Like, so the reason we did that, here's why we returned the phylactery, is because it gave a really good trinket. Like, it was like 150 attack power versus undead. It was crazy good. Like, so of course you had to do it. Of course you had to give it away.
So it was defeated. We then went and we assaulted Northrend and we defeated Kel'Thuzad.
Yeah.
This time, though, his phylactery was nowhere to be seen. This was an enduring mystery for quite some time, but years later, we do find Kel'Thuzad once more in the Shadowlands, but only after fending off yet another Scourge invasion, which is the pre-patch event.
Okay.
That is, of course, one implemented by the Cult of the Damned that Kel'Thuzad set up so long ago, and the Mossworn. It is, of course, all in the name of the Jailer.
Don't show this.
Because,
Don't show that,
Kel'Thuzad, as it turns out, is doing just fine in Undeath. He is serving the Jailer in a fairly major way. So suffice to say,
so Kel'Thuzad is like he's like a middle manager of the Maw? Like, I can't believe that the Yoinkening, like, I can't believe that the plot device decided for how to move Anduin into the Shadowlands is that two random Valkyries, like corrupted evil Valkyries, whatever the fuck, Mossworn, just grab him and fucking take his ass up there. And like, in a way, I almost think that it's good. Because it's just like, yeah, just make it happen, right? Just make it fucking happen. Get it out of the way. It's like, yeah, pride fucking right. It's like, perfect. Yeah, the chains silence them. Yeah, sure they do.
Here, a Necrolord player's
device,
you will come toe-to-toe with his handiwork.
Yeah, how else do you think it would happen? Yeah, it's true.
Being set up, I would say, as a major villain.
Right.
Now, this all raises a very, very important question.
Okay.
When did Kel'Thuzad find out about the Jailer? At what point did that happen? When did he find out that he was not working for a king, that rather he was working for a pawn? When did he find out the truth of the Lich King? that the Lich King, in fact, is an instrument of a almost unknowably ancient evil. That is obviously impossible to know.
I don't think that he ever knew. I don't think Arthas ever had any idea. Like, I think that it was just like kind of because Arthas was, it seemed like he didn't really have any idea.
But it's
stage. Like there's no way to know.
I will say this. If Kel'Thuzad knew about the Jailer since he was contacted by the Lich King, since, say, Warcraft 3, then it does make some of Kel'Thuzad's dealing with Arthas rather interesting, given how he, along with Mal'Ganis, well, seemingly served to steer Arthas towards Frostmourne, and then, of course, to his ultimate fate as the Lich King.
Okay. That makes sense, yeah,
With
sure.
Frostmourne mentioned, well, let's talk about aesthetics, because they do matter, I actually think, more than you'd initially suspect.
Alrighty.
Frostmourne and its counterpart, the Helm of Domination, are, of course, visually speaking, perfect exemplars of the Maw.
They're
just
fucking
fit
badass.
right at home there, which does make a lot of sense.
They're fucking awesome,
They're clearly
dude.
things of the Jailer, and we do know the Jailer is the Helm's master.
Of course.
And then, of course,
everybody
just look
knows
at
that.
Icecrown Citadel. Well, just after Arthas broke the Frozen Throne and became who the Jailer actually meant him to be, things changed around Icecrown. I mean, just look at it.
Yeah,
now, according to Chronicle, the Dreadlords built Icecrown, but by the time, of course, Icecrown turned from just a lump of ice into the citadel we saw in Wrath, well, that's when the Dreadlords had seemingly been booted out. So it actually may seem that the Arthas Lich King oversaw this reconstruction to make it resemble the Maw. Why? Well, that's really something that's tricky to say. I imagine that the canon will end up saying that it's something to do with how the veil between worlds had weakened at that location. Of course,
I think that the Jailer just fucking like was in his head telling him to make it like that, you know? Because it's like, any time that you get into like mind control things, and it always is like, it's like time travel in a way. There's so much theory to it, and there's so much that you can just kind of assume, or that you have to assume, and so much guessing you have to do, that it's not, in my opinion, it's kind of annoying to deal with a story like that.
Rest of the Scourge, though, have very different architecture to that of the Maw. I mean, if you look at the Maw in the Shadowlands expansion, it's not full of ghouls and abominations. No, ghouls and abominations are not from the Maw. They are from Maldraxxus. Now, the original Scourge architecture, as established by the Lich King Ner'zhul, well, they directly resemble that of Maldraxxus. Now, this gets a bit bizarre. Previously, Blizzard said that Ner'zhul Lich King was impressed by the Nerubians during the War of the Spider, and therefore he based his constructions on that of the Nerubians. Well, we now know that's not really the case, right? No, it's based off Maldraxxus. So this gets a bit weird, because it begs another big question.
Yeah, wow, what a surprise. It was a little bit kind of retconned. Yeah, like, I feel like, yeah, it's like, I don't really care, but whenever you think about it, it is kind of like, okay, let's actually look at this and see what's going on.
Why did the Nerubian architecture resemble that of Maldraxxus? Now, you may say, and I do think you would be correct, that that's because Maldraxxus as an idea didn't exist whenever Blizzard did that aesthetic, but of course, we're dealing with the modern lore, we have to work out how to massage things so they actually do work. Indeed, when we dive into this more, we think about more strange things about the Nerubians. Well, why are they also immune to the Plague of Undeath? And, of course, the psychic powers of the Helm of Domination, as is chronicled in the War of the Spider books in-game. Well, they are Akir, that's one thing. Now, the Akir, of course, are beings formed from the old gods, long ago. Now, the Nerubians specifically used to worship Yogg-Saron, but they actually rebelled and split away from him thousands of years before the modern storyline.
I feel like I wouldn't want to rebel from Yogg, because he's really big. Like, I feel like if you... Yeah, it's like... If you're like an acolyte of Yogg-Saron, that's pretty much like a... That's a real commitment. Yeah, that's a serious commitment there.
And that's something that leaves the lore in a really strange place. Because if the Nerubians were of Yogg-Saron, and were also resistant to the Shadowlands power, and had buildings and constructions that look like those found in the Shadowlands, then does it suggest that Yogg-Saron, the self-proclaimed god of death, had some form of knowledge of the Shadowlands, that there was some deeper connection there? It really is quite hard to tell. Now, there is another thing as well when we think about this architecture. Icecrown Citadel was built using Saronite. That's the crystallized blood of Yogg-Saron. So why would that be? Why would they decide to make the analogous, the equivalent of Torghast out of the blood of an old god? I think it's very clear.
Because he's really big and there's a lot of it. Like, if you've been to Sholazar Basin, Bellular, it's all Saronite. There's like 4 titanium veins in the whole zone. Like, what the fuck else are they going to use?
To me, right now,
what else are they going to use?
This is just lore where it's as if Blizzard had a very different idea of how things would go during Wrath of the Lich King. And I think something that supports that is that Wrath of the Lich King like greatly intended to have a lot more old god related basically interactions between them and Arthas.
Maybe.
This is something the
I don't know about
since
that.
Commented on in a blue post where they said there were parallels, but they didn't really get them all in game. And indeed, you then do wonder, as of course Bolvar dons the helm, why does it play Yogg-Saron's theme? And while they also are calling Yogg-Saron,
I remember, like, didn't Chris Metzen or somebody say that the only reason they had Bolvar, they brought him back and they gave him the Lich King thing, they did this whole thing, is because people liked them at the beginning of the expansion? I feel like they just played it because it was ominous music. Like, this is the same shit that I thought whenever I was in fucking high school, and we would read a poem, and then the teacher would say that this is somehow an allegory to Hitler. I'm like, bitch, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, this guy's talking about a bicycle. Like, it's not about Hitler at all. Like, you're just reading too much into it. The fuck do you mean? And, like, this is the same thing. Like, I'm sure a lot of these things, like, yeah, maybe some of them were planned out. But I bet back in Wrath, they didn't have any idea what the fuck this Shadowlands was. They're like, oh, why are we going to play Yogg's music? I don't know, it sounds cool. Like, it's like, oh, you know, like, oh, wow, oh. You know, they just put it in there. Like, I don't buy into the idea that this is some master fucking grand plan over 10 years.
On the god of death. This stuff is all a bit strange, I'll totally admit that. And I think what's happened here is the lore is going in this modern direction. And there's just some little bits from the past that don't necessarily align with that.
Exactly.
And I think that probably what has to happen is that this situation has to be salvaged. And I think it could be salvaged by filling in a few gray areas, a few gaps. Perhaps, right, we could work out, why is it that Yogg-Saron referred to himself as the god of death? Had Yogg-Saron perhaps scryed into the Shadowlands? Of course, Yogg-Saron originally is the person who touched, he touched the tendrils of the World Tree that created the Emerald Nightmare. He then, of course, passed that off to N'Zoth, but perhaps did he, through doing that, gain some sort of insight into the Nightmare, and then maybe an insight into Ardenweald, and then from there he understood some of the Shadowlands. Who knows?
I do. I think they probably just put it in there, and they just said he's the god of death, because that sounds pretty fucking cool. Like, you've got this big-ass, crazy, like, weird tentacle guy. He's like, oh, I'm the god of death. It's like, oh, fuck, dude, that's crazy. Oh, my God. Like, that's what I really think that it is. Because, like, I think that any measure, Yogg-Saron is probably more powerful than the Jailer. Like, he's literally the size of an entire continent. Like, we had to, like, use the combined power of, like, all of the Titan Keepers just to pop a fucking pimple. I feel like Yogg-Saron is much more powerful. The Jailer is Titan level. The Jailer is more powerful, apparently. I don't know. The Jailer is a Titan. It's hard to say, man.
But I think we just have a situation right now where we do have to wonder, why do the Nerubians have so much of Maldraxxus in their empire? How did they get a look at that?
Yeah.
And why did the Jailer's agents construct Icecrown Citadel out of an old god's blood? Those things are very strange, but I do believe they could be resolved. Before we bring it all together, though, I actually just want to further address the elephant in the room here, and that is retroactive continuity.
To be fair, I actually thought he was about to do an ad segue. I actually thought that right there, that's, you know, like, okay, here's the ad segue. The elephant in the room is, what am I going to do if I want to watch a TV show, but my IP doesn't let me? Well, thank God it's going to be fucking NordVPN. I was just waiting for that shit to happen.
Look, all this new lore makes complete sense with the modern spin of things.
Yeah,
we have the book that spells it out very clearly, the Dreadlord's infiltration of the other cosmic forces.
Was such a good
since
video.
we made that video, more evidence has came to light on beta supporting it.
Such a good one.
Problem is, though,
so good.
Right, and this is obvious to everybody, that back in Warcraft 3, none of that was Metzen's intention. To be real with you and sort of break out of the lore presenter role, in Warcraft 3, I think in Wrath of the Lich King, the Jailer doesn't exist. Kel'Thuzad is loyal to the actual Lich King. There is some interesting stuff going on with the push and pull between Ner'zhul and Arthas. And I think, in that the Dreadlords are actually the Lich King's Legion Jailers. I think they were obviously that in Warcraft 3. And
yeah, it just seems like that would make sense. Yeah, I feel like it's fine to change it, in my opinion. Yeah, I'm okay with changing it. Like, overall, the retcons are things that you can laugh at and goof around at, but as long as the general story is okay, like, you can't imagine having like a story with perfect continuity over 15 years that like constantly gets updated and changed. Like, you're going to have things that don't have perfect continuity. Like, I don't think it's that big of a deal.
It's really pretty damn cut and dry when you actually look at Warcraft 3 and play through it and that stuff. And, I mean, this is where I have to break away from presenting lore and talk about dealing with canon in IPs. In situations like this, regardless of our attachment to the older sources, you basically have to take the modern information as having the highest level of canon. Older lore that only somewhat fits that, that sometimes just has to be recontextualized in order for the modern story to work. At least the modern story that is being told. Now, this is obviously something that's controversial. I mean, just look at Chronicle Volume 3. As I covered in the previous video in this series, if you take that as a 100% fact historical account, then its Lich King segment makes no sense within the actual confirmed Shadowlands Lich King lore, and it actually contradicts a bunch of Wrath of the Lich King lore.
Yes, it does.
If you then see Chronicle as just being Arthas's account, his perspective while he was the Lich King, then the whole thing makes perfect sense. And I think that's an example of what we've got to do here.
I think that's okay. Like, if they want to use that perspective, I'm completely okay with that. You know, it's a little bit of a, it's a little bit cheap, but I'm okay with letting that go. Fine.
I mean, it states that the Dreadlords crafted Frostmourne. That's just false. Blizzard have since said that no, they took it from the Shadowlands. You see what I mean here? Blizzard have got their hammer, and they are hammering some of that old lore into shape so that they can tell their new story. It's a story that's all about a larger scale sort of cosmic thing that's playing out. That certainly is a far cry from our struggles against the bandits of Westfall, but that is what they're doing. And I think having an understanding that this is the sort of thing that's going on is, even if it's slightly frustrating to you, useful for processing all of this new information.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, like, again, I'm okay with some degree of retconning. It's not that big of a deal to me. It's whatever. It depends on, like, just how, like, contradictory it is to, like, an offhanded comment that Kel'Thuzad makes in Warcraft 3. Making sure that the lore conforms to that is not that big of a deal to me. But it just depends on, like, the scale of the importance of what's being changed.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that detour. It is now time to bring this two-part series together, okay? Ner'zhul wore the Helm of Domination, a powerful artifact that the Jailer is the master of. Ner'zhul is said to have hated the Dreadlords and the Legion. I do not doubt that, but it now seems that the Jailer did actually have quite a lot of control there. Now, Kel'Thuzad was obviously recruited by the Lich King, and over in the Shadowlands, roughly around this point of time, probably before it a little bit, the House of Plagues fell, and the Plague of Undeath was stolen, and it was brought to Azeroth, where
So were there undead whenever Draka was alive, though? Because, like, wouldn't that be, like, kind of easy to tell if this is, like, what the cause was? Because Draka was alive, so if there were no undead, whenever Draco was alive, and then that cinematic actually was like fucking a long time ago. If that's actually how it happened. If that cinematic was actually a long time ago, like in terms of like the years in the lore, then actually that fits together really well.
The Zad began to spread it. And I would also imagine that whenever the plague was being exfiltrated from the Shadowlands, that's perhaps when they also grabbed Frostmourne and the Helm.
Right.
Now, then, time passed. Mal'Ganis, of course, lured Arthas over to Northrend, and Arthas ended up wielding Frostmourne. Arthas then fell fully to the sword, and he pledged himself to the Lich King. Then, when the Legion came calling, seemingly with the Dreadlords appearing to be sided with them, what happened is that Arthas and Kel'Thuzad teamed up, right? Kel'Thuzad, he held the fort in Lordaeron, and then Arthas headed up north, and that's of course where he defeated Illidan, where he removed the Legion influence from the Lich King.
That was so
Arthas
crazy,
then, of course, took control of the Helm of Domination for himself. He brought it together with Frostmourne. He united the Jailer's two most powerful weapons on Azeroth.
Oh!
And by this stage,
that actually makes a lot of sense.
now had a firm base of power on Azeroth, one that was free from the control of the Legion, who of course he used as an instrument to set this whole thing up via his Dreadlord agents. From this point onwards then, the Jailer clearly just gained more and more power and influence within that helm.
Wow.
That is why Arthas asks his father, is it over? Whenever he is free from the Helm of Domination.
Oh my
whenever
God.
he's actually free from the Jailer's influence. So,
that's
of course,
insane,
with the plan
dude.
to have Arthas wipe us out failing,
I feel like, but did Arthas ever like, because if you're the Lich King, like, would you never like take off the helmet every once in a while? Like, did he never take it off? So like, he never take it, like, because like, you had to wash your hair, or like, I don't know, you just didn't feel like wearing it. You had like a headache, you wanted to lay down and go to sleep or something like that. You just never take the helmet off. The helmet has glue.
Jailer used his Dreadlords, Sylvanas, Helya, and Muzala to manipulate events, right? And that, of course, culminated in Sylvanas' destruction of the Helm of Domination. The act that, of course, paved the way for the Jailer to eventually breach into and consume Azeroth, which would pretty much be the end for the whole lot of us. Now, recent lore has actually came in that supports this stuff. The art book literally says that that is Sylvanas' job, and the art book actually says that the fact that Bolvar was so touched by life allowed him to resist death when he wore the helm, which again completely confirms what this theory is. It actually just makes complete sense. This, I would say, is the story.
Okay.
So there you go. The Scourge's original purpose was to be the immune system of the Shadowlands, right? The defense force, you know?
Oh, bro, that's true. Helmet was off during the fucking loading screen in Wrath of the Lich King. Yeah, he took the fucking helmet off. That's true. That's fucking true, dude. Oh my God, I forgot all about that. Wow.
You've got the bioweapon sort of wing in the House of Plagues. You've got the houses that are more focused in martial strength. You've got the one that is focused on spycraft. That is what Maldraxxus is. But what happened to us is that power, the power of Maldraxxus, something designed to safeguard one of the most important things seemingly in the cosmos of the first one's creation.
That's
that
really
was
big.
Unleashed against us on the mortal plane. And now, in the Shadowlands pre-expansion event, one that is very soon going to be hitting servers, we will once again see Kel'Thuzad's Cult of the Damned wield that Maldraxian power
I wonder if we'll
us.
see Kel'Thuzad in the
So there you go.
event.
That's it. That is
That would be
the
crazy.
Scourge. Of course, there are one or two little issues right now, as I pointed out.
Dude?
You know, why did they make Icecrown out of Saronite? That was clearly a creative decision made in the Wrath of the Lich King expansion.
It could be like a fucking, like an element of dominance, right? It's like, we're gonna fucking make this thing out of the bones of the guy that we beat that's on your side. Because, like, isn't, like, so basically the Void Lords are represented by the old gods. You know what I mean? And so if you put them into the game, And like you're saying like, okay, well, we're going to make the fucking ICC out of the old gods. That's like kind of a big fuck you to the Void Lords, because they're like, this is your dude. And now he stares. Now he stares in a door and like a, I don't know, like a table.
Where there was supposed to be more of an old god connection than there actually was, to the point where the developers actually commented on it after the fact.
Yeah.
You've got that, you've got the architecture, those things are a little bit awkward, but yeah, this is the modern lore of the Scourge, where they came from, how they operated, what's up with Kel'Thuzad, all of those shenanigans. Is this a massive departure from what we had first thought? Yes.
Yeah,
it is. Yes. Is that controversial? Yes, it definitely is.
I think that it's controversial, sure, but I'm actually okay with a certain degree of the retconning, right? It's like, it's a means to an ends, and I think the ends for it is okay. Like, I'm a supporter of making it a good story, and that's really what I care about the most, is just having the good story. And if it's a good story, then that's what that's the fucking dude. Wait, no, that's before he became the Lich King. Because he became the Lich King at the very end of the Frozen Throne, right? Like the end of the expansion of Warcraft 3. So this was before he was the Lich King. Right now, he's just an asshole. Like, yeah, he's not the Lich King, he's just an asshole. So we don't see him as Lich King until like way later on.
I think that all the spycraft and the power games, I think it's all very interesting, but I even look at this and I kind of think, I like that old lore. Could we have maybe got here without recontextualizing so much of that?
I had to get pissed, guys. I'll be right back. I'm back. Sorry about that, boys. Had to take whoopies.
That stuff. Well, that's where I was going to leave this video. I was going to let it off. However, there is one thing I would like to say. A lot of people have been worried about Ner'zhul. About maybe Ner'zhul not having full control of things. Here's what I'd say. Ner'zhul hated the Legion. Who else hated the Legion? I mean, pretty obviously the jailer, right? He was just using them. A part of me has to wonder if the jailer had more control over Arthas. Of course, both of his artifacts brought together is what Arthas is. If he actually had more control over Arthas than he did Ner'zhul.
Of course he did.
And if maybe Ner'zhul was just his mechanism to get this whole thing started.
Of course, like, Ner'zhul was a bitch. Like, not only did he die in a 5-man dungeon, which is, like, kind of lore, but also, like, he got fucking... No, really, like, what's the word for it? He got outsmarted by Gul'dan? And Gul'dan's like the biggest loser in the whole story. He got. Yeah, he got by Gul'dan, and Gul'dan spends the whole fucking timeline dying. Like, it's like he gets his ass beat in the Tomb of Sargeras. He just dies. And then later on, he gets captured by Grom, and he gets used as a battery. And then finally, Archimonde fucking throws him through a portal after he fucks up there too. And then on top of that, that's before he fucks up. And then, then after that, then he fucks up again in, what do you call it? In the Nighthold. And then he summons Illidan, and then Illidan blows him up. Like, the only impressive thing that Gul'dan ever did was disenchanting Varian. And Varian's like a human warrior. Like, I'm sorry, but like, anytime that your accomplishment is beating a warrior, that's like really low. It's really, really low. Like, anybody can beat, like, warriors. It's like, basically it's like this. It's like you have like a guy with like a fucking like full tack suit on with like an M16, and then the warrior is like literally a dude with a club. He's got like a baseball bat. Come on. It's like, who's gonna come out with spikes on it though. Yeah, and imagine a dude's like a bodybuilder, but does it matter? No. He still just gets his ass beat.
But that Arthas was the actual true intended host.
Yeah,
now,
Arthas
I think that
was way more
be
badass.
Pretty much supported by how things play out in game. And if that is the case, then I do have to wonder, what the hell's going on with Ner'zhul? Was he totally destroyed? No, I think he's been knocking around the helm. The helm was, of course, destroyed. What happened there? I would not be surprised if somehow, some way, something goes on with Ner'zhul. I mean, not to do any major spoilers, but
I don't think
I'm pretty sure the Helm of Domination does get reforged, does get brought back together.
Yeah,
Now,
I agree with that.
If that happens in a way that perhaps is able to purge the Jailer's influence or something like that from it, then what else would we find in there? I mean, just look at Legion. You know, we did a bunch of stuff in Legion, and the sort of ghostly specter of Ner'zhul got a bit pissed off at us for ruining his plans. What was going on there? Clearly that's a breadcrumb that has been set up. I think that means that some of that OG Scourge lore, well, could actually be continued. That's it for me. I hope you enjoyed today's video.
Don't you say
Let
that,
me know what your
Bellular.
comments
I'm gonna have
are
to shave my
on
fucking
this
head.
Entire lore situation. And with
Yeah,
that said,
do not fucking
I'll see
say
you
that.
next time.
Yeah, see, he starts talking about it being a Scourge expansion. Like, it's not, dude. It's not, dude. There's no way.